When I first read Dark Age, around the time it came out, like 3 years ago I think, I rated this book a 4.5 out of 5, but now after I finished reading it the second time, it's basically a 5 out of 5 and possibly one of my favorite books of all time. Wanna know why? Then stick around and find out. So, Dark Age by Pierce Brown is book 5 in the Red Rising saga. It's the second post-trilogy book, so obviously this along with Iron Gold are very different from the trilogy, which had a lot of YA vibes unlike these two, which are closer to grimdark more than anything, even if they're not fully grimdark like something out of the Warhammer universe. The story continued pretty much immediately after the end of Iron Gold, and there's an additional point of view character here even though Iron Gold already had 4, which is a lot for me. It's hard for me to care about stories with too many point of view characters because I need to be invested in all of them. I can't just be invested in the journeys of 1 or 2 of them if I want to like the book, which brings me to my next point. Balance. One of the things that made me unable to give Iron Gold a 5 out of 5 was the fact that I didn't immediately get invested in the journeys of the POV characters from the get-go. Except for Darrow, of course, because that's who we followed in the original trilogy. But in this one, it's as if the setups and all the stakes were already taken care of by Iron Gold and now it's just time for the fun stuff. And back in Iron Gold, I hated Lysander kind of, in a bad way for a bit, because he was just so annoying. But here I hated Lysander in a good way, if that makes sense, because as annoying as he seemed, I get where he's coming from. I'm not saying that fascist anti-democracy case system is how a society should be, but I get why Lysander would think that. The book has made it easy for me to understand where he's coming from basically, where it wasn't quite that way in Iron Gold at least because it had to do a lot of setups. And yeah, I was even rooting for him for a bit, which isn't really something I thought would happen after Iron Gold. The interesting thing about the character, or the balance, is that Lysander and Darrow is a very interesting pair of protagonists, or protagonist and antagonist, depending on how you look at things. Either way, their dynamic is explored in such a great, nuanced way here that I can't help but want more of it. They're really just two people who want basically the same thing, but have very different ways or visions in how to achieve it, which makes it all the more tragic in my opinion. And even the new POV character, Virginia, or Mustang, was really compelling. Her chapters were some of the best of the entire series so far because it showcased a side of the story that we didn't really get to see much in Iron Gold. And I also like the non-POV characters here as well, from Pax, Volga, Alexander, who is my favorite, and others as well. They're also compelling. Part of it is because of how high the stakes are, and they all have such up and down journey, and you'll just never predict what could happen to any of them. It's just so unpredictable, which makes everyone more compelling. And before I go to my next point, I would appreciate it if you drop a like if you're enjoying the review so far. Anyway, point number 2 is clarity. This is something that bothered me a bit during my first read of the book because the clarity is achieved through a lot of info dumps, which usually is problematic, but in my second read I think it works because it means I don't really get lost in the intrigue or in the politics anymore like I did in Iron Gold, because there I simply didn't know who a lot of these characters were, but here the info dumps meant that I knew who's who and what's what, so the intrigue is super interesting, especially because of that. It adds to the unpredictability that I mentioned earlier because it feels like no one is safe from the politics of this world. Speaking of politics, while yes, it's clear who the book thinks are the good guys, I appreciate that they're still depicting everything with nuance, like I said earlier with Lysander. I appreciate how the book shows that even with the absolute best of intentions, you can still cause bad things to happen. And when that happens, others will try to fight against you and try to do what they believe is good. And yeah, I just really love that part of it. Okay, so my final point is Golden Sun Part 2. So Golden Sun is book 2 in the series, in the original trilogy, and while I do think that the plot of this book might be a bit long-winded at some parts, but this is just like some minor nitpicks, I have to say I think it was paced and structured in a way that made me unable to stop reading, which really reminded me of Golden Sun. Part 1 of this book felt like it could be the climax of another book, and after that I thought that it would lose momentum, but I was so wrong. Somehow it kept my attention all the way through in a way that didn't feel forced or nonsensical. If anything, the way the story was paced revealed a lot about the world building that we didn't know before, so that's another plus. Not only was it unputdownable, yeah, that's a word that I just made up, it was also really unpredictable like I previously said. I was never sure which characters were safe. I used to think that this was detrimental to the book, but now I think this is like a really good thing about it. It reminded me of the best parts of Golden Sun, book 2, but while Golden Sun is only like that around the ending, Dark Age was like that the whole time. It never lost momentum, and it ended on such a high note that made me really excited and unable to wait for the next book, to the point where it basically did Golden Sun better than Golden Sun itself, which was already an excellent book. So yeah, overall, this is an amazing book. I don't really have anything negative to say about it. So yeah, 5 out of 5 stars. It might be one of my favorite books of all time, but I don't really think a lot about stuff like that, so yeah. If you're wondering about what I thought about the previous book, Iron Gold, you should check out this video right here to see what I thought about it, and yeah, thanks for watching.